Welcome back. This is the second of 4 videos on Catholic social teaching. In this video, I'd like to look at duties. Catholic social teaching holds that our duties are the minimum levels of mutual care and respect that people owe one another. And this basic justice is expressed by 3 concepts: commutative justice, distributive justice, and social justice. Commutative justice is something that applies generally between individuals or groups in specific situations. It calls for fairness in all agreements and exchanges between persons, and that's whether these persons are individuals or social groups. Commutative justice holds that the basic dignity of all people must be respected in human relations. To express the point concretely, workers are obliged to work diligently for their employers, the people who pay their wages. However, the other side of commutative justice is that employers should treat their employees with decency and human respect. They should pay them a fair wage and ensure that their working conditions and the sort of work done is not degrading. If we look to the sale of goods, whether it's by individuals or corporations, commutative justice says that a purchaser is obliged to pay a fair price. The other side of that is that the seller is obliged to provide goods that are commensurate with the price paid. In a way, commutative justice is just basic common sense. It says that one party should not exploit another in their exchanges with other people. The second duty is distributive justice, and this applies over a more general social context. Distributive justice means that we're required to evaluate the distribution of resources in the light of the needs of people, especially those who are in need. The Second Vatican Council, in its Pastoral Constitution on the Church, said this, and I'll quote from paragraph 69. The right to have a share of earthly goods sufficient for oneself and one's family belongs to everyone. The fathers and doctors of the Church held this view, teaching that we are obliged to come to the relief of the poor, and to do so not merely out of our superfluous goods. Essentially then, if people are organised into a community, then the community has an obligation to meet the needs of its members. And when we think of the needs of people, we might think of food, clothing, and shelter. That's certainly true. But there are needs that people have to function as members of a community. So there's an obligation in distributive justice then for things like education. What's very important for distributive justice is a concept of justice which is really rooted in the Hebrew Scriptures, what Christians call the Old Testament. If we look through the law of Moses, for example, there are rules about how one should harvest a field, and this is a really good concrete example. People were told that during the harvest, they shouldn't harvest the corner of the field, and also that when they were collecting the grain or the produce, if they dropped some, it would be left behind. The idea was that the corner of the field and the produce that was dropped was there to be collected by the poor, the widow, the orphan, or the foreigner. That is, people who had no means of production. So the Hebrew Scripture concept of justice is a little bit different to the concept of justice we have today. Today we might think of justice as getting what you deserve or getting what you have made or earned. Justice in the Hebrew Scriptures, in the Old Testament tradition, was not just that, but justice was getting what you need. And so I'd like you to think of that. It's a really good comparison and contrast. That distributive justice, which is rooted in this Old Testament tradition, is not just about getting what you've earned, what you've made, but it's also about ensuring that people receive what they need. The third duty is social justice. Social justice relates to the way that larger social institutions are organised. Social justice means that individuals have the duty to participate and contribute to the life of their society. The other side of social justice is that society has the duty to enable people to participate in this way. And that's why social justice in this sense is often called contributive justice. It means that all people have the obligation to contribute to their society. Social justice or contributive justice calls on everyone to make their contribution to the common good. The other side of that is society is called on to foster this contribution by all people. A concrete example of this is that if we live in a democracy, we have the duty to vote and participate in the political process. That's the duty on individuals. The duty of society is to enable and foster the participation of people in this way. In other words, to make voting accessible to all qualified people. So social justice implies that there is a social obligation for economic and social conditions to be organised in a way that people can make their contribution to society. The duties of commutative, distributive and social justice demand that we think hard about our ways of living in relation to our fellow people, especially in the light of the needs of the poor. We are called to resist the temptation to be selfish, self-seeking, and to consider our obligation to others. That is, to ask the question, do we exist just for ourselves, or do we exist as people for others? Now that self-evaluation doesn't apply to individuals alone. It applies across the board to families, businesses, corporations, unions, governments, churches. All institutions need to be examined as to whether their social interactions meet the demands of gospel values in our world.